Okay, so today we'll start with the second topic, that is the test driven development. Now this is one of the type of testing what we have used. Now basically I'll just give a brief idea of what is testing. Now testing is required for every code development, and since for a better or essential code development, testing is required. Now there are various testing, like it is manual testing or automated testing. We'll see what type of different testings are there. Now even here, this is one of the type of testing where a method is being used, like test driven development. Now it is an approach for program development. Now here, while developing the program, we use to do some type of testing. Now it is interleaving testing and code development. Means what? How testing is done while developing the code, and how every phase of code is developed, testing is used here. Now essentially, the code is developed in an incremental method. It is like I am going to start writing some code, and immediately after I complete a set of code, I am going to test whether my code is correct or not. Now this gives me a better idea that if a code is wrong or having an error in it, now this incremental testing will also help me to find out in an initial stage where my code is wrong. Now if I don't do this, if I write around, take an example like a huge project which has around 3,000 to 4,000 lines of code, and if I don't test it in the beginning or in initial time, I don't know where the error is there or what issues it has. It may be a case that the errors are at the initial stage and I have not found it, so it gives me a difficult situation that I need to trace entire code for it. So better what we do is we use the test driven development method. So whenever I develop a code, I'm going to test the code immediately. Now once the code is developed, it is tested first, as I said, and before moving to the next code. So immediately when I write a code, I'm going to test that code. Every time I write a new code, I have to pass some certain test to it. Like example, if I'm taking a login page, I need to see whether it is being validated, validation is done or not properly. Like the username should be seen, but the password name or password should not be seen there. So that is a validation process. So it gives me a better method that whether my first login page is correct or not. So here every time I write a code, I need to pass certain tests to it. Now what type of tests? We assume that the test which we are going to use, or test what we are there, it is going to be different, or it is going to differ from application to application. Like for a website, my test cases may differ, or my test driven development may differ. Similarly, for a Android app, my test case will differ again. Now this we have a certain example. It's a development process. Now test driven development can also be used for plan driven development also. Now how? We'll take an example here. Now first we need to find out what are the new functionalities. Like assume I want a website, what are the new functionalities? I want to find it. So it is like my login. Okay, I need to find out a login and who are the authenticated users for it. Now once I find out what are the functionalities, like who should be there, like in login again I have two types, like my admin and user. So I need to find out who are admin and who are the users of my website. Then I'm going to write the code for it. Once I've written the code, I will run a test to it. Okay, so when I write the code, I'm going to run a test for my particular code. Now you can test, you have to test for both the admin as well as for the user. Now once the test is complete, we will come to a conclusion whether the test has passed or failed. So if it is failed, I will do some implementation in my functionalities, that is my changes whatever are required. Once the changes are required, I'll refactor them and then run the test again. Means what? Here you can say I will perform certain updations in my current code and then run the test again. Now assume that my test fails without even after even doing the refactorization, means doing the updation. Then what I have to do? I have to find out what has gone wrong with my functionalities. Means what this can be like your what requirements are being taken or considered, that I have to reconsider it again, so that any changes in my functionalities I have to make it again with or consider new functionalities. Once I do this, again I will do some updation or write the code, run the test, again I will check whether it is passed or failed, and if required again I will do refactorization and so on. Now this is an entire process for a plan driven development. Now Now, we'll consider how to write a test. Now, before you write a test, you need to know something. Now, like we need to understand what is intended to be test. Like if I'm using a test for a login page of an app, I cannot use the same method I cannot use a same method for a website. Why? Because an application and a website may differ. Like example, a Google account. Google account app and website uses the same. But here, while in my website, I have extra information like ads which are being floated on my website. But whereas an app, I don't have much ads here. Now, to design that, I need to find out what test to be used for an app and what test is to be used for a website. Similarly, I need to understand how and what should be the output. Now, if I don't know what is the expected output, okay, if I don't know what is my expected output, I cannot write a proper test for it, or I cannot code a proper program for it. Similarly, it makes, now all these things makes easier to get a required code. Now here, if you understand both of these things, the first and the second case, that what is to a test to be used and what type of intention we need to have for a test, and how and what to be used or what should be the output, so that I can write a proper code for it. Now once I know all these, it makes me easier, or makes it easier to find out or get me the required codes or the required output, in short. Now once I know how to write a test, what is the test, I have understood what type of test I have to write, what should be the output, and so on. Now there are certain issues to it. Now there are two issues basically. The first one is incomplete knowledge of what code I am trying to develop. So here, if I don't know what type of code I am going to develop, it gives me a improper development of my test, or to write a test, I don't know what type of test to be written. Similarly, what if I have misunderstood a test? Like instead of giving a test for a login app, I am thinking that it is for a website. So here my test cases change. So I have misunderstood. This creates a lot of issues. Now issues are that my application size of my mobile phone will not be the same. Means whenever you open a Google account or a Google form or a Google email account of yours, then it may not fit in your mobile window. So here the test what I am going to use here for application is different than my website. So here I have misunderstood what are they. Third one is I have written the code, I have written a test, but I am getting a wrong output. So this gives me two issues while writing a test. Means what, my test is giving me a wrong output, not the code, but the test what I am going to perform on my code is giving me a wrong output. So these are my two issues. Now we will see some benefits of test driven development. Now, we will see some other benefits of TDT. Now, first one is code coverage. Now, every time you write a code, it should have at least one test case to perform on it. So, there may be more than one test for certain codes like your money transaction, online money transaction or online payment. For that, they do multiple tests so that the code or your transaction doesn't fail. So, here, but at least for a code, there should be at least one test case for every code what you develop. Now, you should also ensure that all the codes in the system have been executed. Now, the reason is that if I write a code which is not being used, it just increases my code length and the execution time. So here, I need to ensure that whatever code I write in the system executes and runs for my application or a software. Now, the code that have been written are to be tested as the defects can be found earlier. Now, every time, as I said in my earlier case, that I need to use TDT. Why? Because when I write a code, I test it. So if there is a bug or if there is an error, I will be able to find out what is that error or a bug in it. So here, TDT also helps us to find out the bugs or issues in an early stage, and I can make changes to that code and get the required output. Similarly, I have regression testing. This is the second part. Now, it is a test suite which is being developed for incrementally as a program is developed. So, it is a test suite developed in an incremental method. Now, you can always run regression test to check if and changes you have made. Like here, in my initial code, I have done some tests and I do some changes. Now, regression test helps me to find out if there is a new error which is being introduced. Now, if I find out a new error, then I can use this regression testing again and again. So, what changes I make, I can understand or I can find out whether a new error or new type of error or issue has been introduced or not. Now, the third one is simplified debugging. This is one of the simplest method. Now, here, when a test fails, okay, it is only because of some certain issues which are being there at a particular point. So, it fails at that point only. Now, newly written codes need to be checked and modified. So, here, if I am writing a code for a login page, as I had said previously about an app. So, a newly code which is being written, like in this case, I have done some changes to my current code. So, newly code which is there, I need to check and modify if required. Now, since I am using simplified debugging, I need not use a debugging tool. So, there are various debugging tools. It can be a manual or automation tools. I need not use these tools since my code is simple or this is one of the methods which is being used. I will just try to look at the code and try to find out where my error or issue is there in my code. So, here this is the third type. We will see the fourth one. The fourth benefit is system documentation. Now I have done regression testing, I have done simple debugging method, or it helps me to do a simple debugging method. The fourth one is system documentation. Now every time I do some test, I need to document it. So why? Because I need to know what type of tests have been done. Now why this is required? A code can be reused by certain other developer also. So in that case, to this code, which type of testing has been done, or what type of test it has passed, I need to find out, and which test it has failed, it has to be documented. So every time I do a testing, even this is a form of documentation. Now this helps me to describe what type of code it was and what the code did for it when I did some or perform some tests on a particular code. Now once I read the test what has been done on a particular code, I will be able to understand that okay, the code does perform in or reacts in a particular method for a particular test, and it reacts in an opposite method for another test. So here the testing or test documentation or system documentation helps me to find out what type of tests are passed and what type of tests are failed for a particular code. Now these are the four benefits of using TDD. Now we'll see some in-depth method of regression testing. What is regression testing and how it helps? Now we'll see in detail how regression testing is used. Now it involves running test sets that have been successfully executed after a changes have been done in a code. So here, if any changes we have done in a existing code, we need to find out what effect does that new code or the changed code does, and the regression test will test these codes with the updation in it. Now it checks that if any changes are being made, does it introduce any new bugs? As I had mentioned earlier, if any new bugs are there, it will check whether a new bug is been introduced or not, or a new error which has been introduced. Now, new code interacts, does that new code interacts with the old code as expected? If not, what should be the changes to be done and how it should be done? So the regression testing gives us an overall idea. Now, it is often an expensive method. Now, this is one of the most important case, that TDD is not expensive, but whereas regression testing is too expensive. Now why? Because TDD is a method that I develop a code and I test it. If required, I do some changes or refactor it there itself. I don't change the entire code, or I don't do any updation in much more in my existing code, and I retest it again. But whereas in regression testing, I do modifications in my entire system, okay, or my entire code, and then retest it again and again till I get the required output. So here, this is most of so this is mostly one of the most expensive method than my TDD. Now it requires more time and effort. Why? Because every time I'm going to do some changes in it, make some changes, I am going to check for new bugs in it. So here, this is time consuming, and at times it is easier to miss important tests. So when I'm trying to develop or modify some code or add some new features in it, it may introduce some bugs which I'm not going to test with some certain case. Like if I'm trying to introduce a online payment method in my existing code, there are various methods like internet banking, second one is debit card, third one is credit card. Now there may be one more case. Nowadays what we use, the UPI method. Now if I have introduced UPI method, it needs to be tested with a particular test case for my UPI. So my UPI can be a Beam UPI or any other UPI method which a bank provides to me. That UPI method, I need to find out a test case to find out whether it is correct, the code is correct for, or whether it is reacting correctly for this UPI method. Now, so in certain case, I may miss some important test case or test what is to be tested on my particular code. Now we'll see how release testing is used. We have one more method. Before that, I'll just give you, we'll just see how test driven is mostly used in different software systems. I'll just write few points to it. Now, we'll see how TDD is used in new system development or a software development. Now, the advantage of using test-driven development in a new system is that either we are going to use a new code which is being developed from the scratch, or we are going to use a code which has been already tested. So I need not worry about the test cases which are going to be used if an existing code is there or successful code is being used and I'm reusing that code. Now, if you are reusing a large code, okay, so like for a banking software, I need to know the customer detail, I need to know the online payment gateway method, the ATM usage of a customer, and the fixed deposit receipts or fixed deposits what he has in the bank, and so on. So every small module, I'm going to use it as an entire code. Now, if I'm combining all these modules or small codes together, I need to find out, or I need to do a test as a whole of the entire system. So I have to test the entire system as a whole together, how the working takes place. So I need to find out a test case for the entire system, not for particular module. But as I said, TDD is every module I develop, I need to find out a test case for it. So here, once I'm clubbing all these small codes, I still need to find out a test case so that I can find out if any errors or bugs have been there. Now, TDD may also be influenced with multi-thread system, okay, like my online payment method. These are 3 different threads or 4 different threads. First one is internet banking, debit card, credit card, and UPI. Now, every thread may have been used in a different method. Why? Because internet banking method, I need to give him a user ID and a password. Debit card method, online payment, I need to give him a 4-digit PIN number. Credit card, the credit card number, name, and the PIN number. And UPI, again I will have a different 6-digit PIN number which is different than a 4-digit debit card or a 4-bit credit card PIN number. Now, in that case, since all these threads, 4 threads are there, they may interact in a very different method and at times may also produce different results. Now, how do you say different results? When I want to do a test on internet banking, it may give me some different results. A test on a debit card, it gives me a different result, and for these two it gives me a different result. So I need to find out a test case for each and every different thread. Now, but when I'm using all this for online payment of a bank, I need to club all these 4 in a single code and make the entire system test in as a whole. So I need to find out a test case or a test method to check or find out a test or run a test on these 4 simultaneously. So here this 4 threads, if I'm using it in a different way, still I need to find out how these 4 threads react for a particular test, which is going to test for all the 4 different threads. Okay. Now we'll see. I'll just give an introduction to release testing. This is the 3rd topic, which will be taken later.